Hey guys, this is Tolly and welcome to Let's Build a JRPG Part 21. Looks like we are live on the internet once again. Just finished Part 20 like 5 minutes ago. Took a few minutes break, just to grab some water, a snack, and mostly just to break up the video. But we're back again. So in the last video, or the last part, which was literally 2 seconds ago for people watching live, we basically refactored the turn order so that the turn order would actually update for the current round by not regenerating all of the icons, but only regenerating the ones that have changed, and getting it so that we show indicators of what an enemy is going to do with the elemental system. So when we perform an attack that generates an element, that element gets moved down to this meter down here. So if we produce this thunder, it will add to this meter, and then this guy uses fire, and we can see this guy is going to attempt to use fire, so we can preemptively now, knowing that he'll use fire, we can consume that fire ourselves, which means he won't be able to do that more powerful attack. And that's where I'm starting to I think that's where we're starting to get into some really interesting gameplay. But now we have these indicators actually showing up on the abilities, showing up down here, and most importantly what we just did, having indicators up here letting us know what the enemy is going to do so that we can prevent them from doing it, or to circumvent them, or find ways to manipulate their actions. We still need to add more of those manipulations. Right now the only thing we can really do is consume the element if we by chance go before them. But the indicators are in place. Now, what we want to do on this stream, the next part here, is we want to handle refactoring these two characters. So we have this concept of, in the JRPG that I'm trying to make, I have this concept of trying to have it so that when we perform an action, it can either be a companion or a hero. So the hero is always represented in this kind of like light gray for the skills. So this is choosing the attack, and then the dark gray is kind of the companion's choices. So we can do magic thunder and he'll attack, and whoever uses an action will be switched to the front and will be the one who takes hits from the enemy for that round. So if I switch to my hero, I know that my hero doesn't go again until the end of the next round. So for that time, enemies will be hitting this character for that period of time. And, you know, hasn't been hit at all, so that's fine. But that's kind of how the system works, is we swap characters back and forth based off of who's acting. And so if we go back here and we then perform an action from our little golem friend, he'll attack and generate the thunder and move to the front. The problem is that I built this rather quickly. I built the system was built around this idea of there being units and units taking turns. But now we really have unit pairs. And the way that I initially implemented that was around this kind of system of each unit, actually if I run the game it's easier to show, each unit can have a component on them which is called the companion component, and the companion component says who my companion is, who's my friend, who am I linked with. But the thing that's kind of unfortunate about that is I use that companion system to determine like turn order and which abilities you use. So for this companion down here, we go, hey, this companion is lightning, and lightning's companion is thief. And so when we do a check here of the companions, we can see that we basically handle the swapping of positions in here. But the other thing that we do is when we actually build the units in the unit factory, we also add the abilities. And we add the companion, but when we add the abilities, we actually do this weird logic and add companion. So, okay, step one, add abilities does a bunch of nonsense, but primarily it's generating all of the game objects that represent what an ability does. For the companion, we actually initialize the companion abilities onto the unit as well. Basically, the core hero unit gets a copy of all of the abilities that the companion has, and that's how we show them in the menu. But the things I'm starting to run into is like, well, what happens if this guy dies? And I was like, okay, well, I'll write some code inside of Combat Manager that actually says on death, then swap the original unit for the companion. Why are you complaining about context? Did I accidentally oh. I removed that by mistake. Okay. I hit a button probably when we were starting the stream. But like on death, if the unit died and like the companion is not knocked out, then make the companion the unit for turn order. But now, like, what if we revive the unit? Now we have to swap them. And just to quickly kind of draw a simple image to represent what we're doing, if we make something that's, I don't know, say 256 by 512 by 256. Essentially, we have a clothesline, right? And that clothesline is got some things attached to it. It's got our units, and each of those units is hanging off the end. Or maybe not a clothesline, maybe like a factory. If you think of this as like a line, and this is an assembly line, and each of these things have like a little unit hanging off the end of it. And then off of the hero unit, I've essentially tacked on a companion unit, which is basically tied to that unit. He's dangling off the end of it. And when we get to the end, when we move everything over, we say, okay, this is this guy's turn. And then when we go to the next one, he has a turn. And then the one after that has a turn. And probably should draw the lines after I draw the circles. And then eventually we loop back around and the whole system loops, and we have the first companion, the first character, and the first companion again. But what we're doing is anytime that we want to have this unit die, we now need this guy to now be circumventing him and linking back up to the top. So now this is the guy. But if we revive him, now we need to like undo that and then reconnect it in this weird way. It feels awful. It's just bad. And so what I want to do instead is I want to be able to say, hey, instead of linking a unit to this line, and again, for context, what we're talking about here is the turn order. When we generate the turn order for these units, which is represented by this thing up here, when we say that this is yellow's turn, yellow actually represents this guy, which then links to this guy. And it creates that weird daisy chain I was just drawing. And so that's super lame. So instead, I think what we want to do is we want to have some sort of intermediate object, some sort of unit pair class, which is going to basically be attached to the turn order. So instead of selecting a specific unit in turn order, we select a unit pair. And that unit pair can clip onto it multiple units. And when we decide, hey, we want this unit to go, choose an ability for them, instead of going, hey, grab this guy's abilities and then also stack this guy's abilities onto this guy, instead the unit pair can be in charge of going, hey, all units that are attached to me, I want you to tell me what your abilities are. And then I will construct a list of abilities to show in the menu. In order to be able to better construct. Dustin Ham has a comment. So is the idea that only a unity or its companion can make a move, not both? Yes, neither can go at the same time. When we perform an action, corrected his statement. So is the idea that only a unit or its companion can make a move, not both? That is correct. So you are choosing whether or not to attack with this one or this one when you perform an action. So really, I think that what I want is there to be this concept of a unit pair. And we can have unit pair objects for like the enemies still, but that enemy unit pair will just simply have the one unit hanging off of it. And so when it asks the enemy to get its abilities, it will just say, okay, get me your abilities. And as an enemy, I will choose one of them for you to perform the attack. And then if one of these units die, say the companion dies, the unit pair doesn't care. We don't have to reconnect anything. It's just now when it requests for everyone to give it its abilities, the when it requests for all the abilities, then it just gets one back from this guy, and this guy would be dead, so he'll probably not return anything, would be the way we write it, and it just continues to function. And if both of these die, then we have to figure out something where this unit pair would need to be removed from the turn order somehow. But we can handle that once both are dead. But if one of them gets revived, we re-add this unit pair to the turn order and, you know, find its spot again. But I think basically adding in this structure here, this idea of an in-between class that's in charge of managing the units, and the unit turn order really focuses on having a series of these pairings, makes a lot of sense. Dusted Ham also says this opens the door for multiple companions too if you want to get fancy with boss battles. This is true. If we build a unit pair, it doesn't have to necessarily be a unit pair. We maybe could find a better name for it. But if we build an in-between class that says, hey, this is the turn order object, then we could have it so that there are maybe a big boss and he has 2 minions, and those minions can either take turns or the boss can, and they can all be like kind of hanging off. And then when you attack and kill the little ones, maybe that enrages the big one and he gets some special abilities, which this thing would need to be in charge of. Again, I don't know exactly, but I do like this structure because it does open us up to that type of idea. I don't know if this drawing was helpful, but that's what we're going to be doing. Dusted Ham has a good name. A unit group. Not Groot. Group. Group? Groot? A unit Groot. Maybe I should just call them a unit Groot. So let's see here. So right now we have the concept of a unit here underneath this unit class, which a lot of this stuff still comes from the original inspiration of Liquid Fire blogs, which we are changing readily throughout the process. But the base is still here. Do I want it to be... For now, we'll put it under here, but I don't know if this is the right spot for this script. So let's call this a unit group. Okay. And then a Unity, this is the one thing that really gets me, is when I create a new script, Unity, for some reason, decides that it's like, oh, well, then you must want to open Visual Studio. And I'm like, not necessarily, especially when I duplicate scripts. It does the same logic. Okay, unit group. Unit group should have inside of it a list of units. Is that what I want? Or do I want... Yeah, I think it just needs to be a list. Like, I don't think I want to do, like, you know, basically a unit slots system where it's like there can be a hero and there can be a companion, because this limits us. So then the exact scenario we were just talking about wouldn't work in this situation, where if instead of a list we had just these 2 objects, then we can't do much with it. We could later expand it, but I think I just want it to be a list of units. Okay, so now, where do we generate our units? Because we now, this is the base of the class. We'll need to write more functions for it, I'm sure, as we find problems with trying to insert this. But where does this go at the beginning? This is where we initialize all the units. And for the most part, what does this do? Is this used anymore? It is. It's still very much used. This is used for updating after battle. This is used for generating all of the units. And it's still used for enabling and disabling the selectors. Okay. Dusted Ham is curious about what does a unit look like the class. So a unit itself is actually pretty straightforward. It's really the composited idea of a unit that's more complicated. But the unit is kind of the root level that we use for everything. So when we look at a unit, a unit right now has basically its design data ID, its combat ID, which defines which version of this unit that we have in combat that's been initialized. And then it has some information that I don't think should be in here. This is some stuff from a previous conversation with Sneaky One. So this display name and portrait, I feel like should be in its own component. I don't think this necessarily needs to be here. I also think the ability IDs could be in its own component as well. So at its core, unit is kind of almost like the root starting point that we hold on to for like all the stuff we do. So if we're ever trying to calculate, like if we want to have an attacker, we save the attacker as a unit. If we want to target, we save the unit as the target. So a unit is made up of several components, but the unit is almost like the base reference that we pass around. So that's why we are going to reference the unit in the unit group, because again, this is the reference we tend to use. But oftentimes we will get this unit and then we will do .get component off of it in order to be able to find other components from it. So we will I don't know if I can find it in these find by references, but we do a lot of like get the unit and then use the unit to get components for. We do a lot of get components in this project. Trying to find a good example of what I'm trying to illustrate. Let's see. Companion? Yeah, so oftentimes we'll do like unit get component companion, and this unit comes from the attacker sequence. So like if we take a quick look before we dive too much deeper into inserting the unit group into the system, just for more clarity, if we look at the character like guard here, we can see that he has a unit at the top, but he has like stats, rank, health, mana, status, row, alliance. All of these things have their own little compartmentalized thing they care about. Like alliance handles whether or not who I'm targeting or what team I'm on. And so if I ever wanted to grab one of these pieces, I would often have something that would let me get the unit. And then once I have the unit, I would do a get component to find the other element that I really care about. Hope that makes sense. Cool. Moving on. Unit group. So now if we go back to here, turn order currently handles all of these units, but even before that, we need to take a look at units for turn order, because this is what we use to generate the turn order. So where does this list come from? From a lot of spots. Okay, so it's used in all the generation code. It's also used in the initialization code for the heroes and the enemies. Oh, this is for the status UI. This is where we actually show the health and the mana of all of our characters. So we use units for turn order to determine that stuff. Where do we actually add the units for turn order? We're looking for the add call. Turn add. Okay, so we character load, and then we generate the we initialize a unit based off of its design data. We do an addressable instantiate based off of that character's design data, his character prefab. Character prefab. Excellent. Bad naming everywhere. And then once this is finished, we call on character load. And on character load, we do, if it's not a companion, add it to the turn order. So this is the type of stuff that's a little bad, because we shouldn't have to do this. So what we need to do instead here is, rather than hard replace units for turn order, which we'll do at some point, let's start by just adding a new class. And let's start working through how do we replace units for turn order one piece at a time. So units groups for turn order. Now, where does this thing get initialized? Oh, it's a public list in a mono behavior. Right, so this is going to just get initialized on run, so that's fine. I don't have to worry about newing the list. So then at this point here, if not a companion add, I think instead what we want to do we want to add this unit to the unit group. And the most simple way to think about that is that we're going to need to create a new one. So we're going to do add same logic, different class. Could make a defined constructor for this, but let's start by just doing This does not work the way I think it does. So, create a new unit group. Oh, is it a public? That's the problem. It's not a public variable. Doesn't like it when I do it that way. That's fine. Let's do it outside and a little bit cleaner. Let's write an actual init function for it, I guess. So we need to do some sort of... Whoop, that's not what I wanted to do. Public void init passing in a unit. This one we do need to worry about initializing. So if the list equals null, do this. Otherwise, add the unit. Okay. So there's problems with this, very clear problems. But let's talk through this. Okay, so instead of adding the units to the turn order, we now have a unit groups for turn order. And we generate a new unit group, add the unit to it, and then add it to this list here. This effectively doesn't do anything different from what we did before. The problem we're going to run into is how do we fetch the unit group that we care about? If I'm a companion, if my character design data says I'm a companion and I'm linked to a specific person, after I finish character loading the prefab and generating its unit, the unit via the unit factory, how do I add myself to the correct group? So does there need to be some different logic that allows us to do a loop through all existing first? Where we go, hey, I'm going to loop through all of the unit groups. In combat character managers list. And then do I need to ask that group if it has my companion, or I guess the proper way to say it is contains, and we make a contains class. Does that make sense? Because then what we're doing is basically we're going to have to say, because we have character data, we generate a unit. We're going to have to figure out whether or not this character has a associated friend and try and find his friend in the group and then add me to the same group as my friend. That's the logic here. So again, what we've done is we want to generate a group, but we also want to double check to make sure that that if we want to add me to a unit group, we may not want to make a new one. We may want to add me to an existing one. How are companions currently added to units? That's a good question. That's a good question. So the way that companions are currently added to units is in some janky ways. So inside of Unit Factory, which actually might be where we need to add this logic, we do add companion. And if companion team member does not equal null, so this is where things get more complicated, is that this data for adding a companion actually comes in from the team members list. So there's a backend manager that has all the list of characters, and so this version of the backend has this list of objects, and this list of objects doesn't have a companion here, but I think the companion is hidden somewhere in one of the other objects. Dusty says, Dusty Ham says, why not pass the group to the companion instead of the parent unit? Because they don't really come in as a, I guess they could. Okay, let's take an even further step back. So right now we are looking at generating the units in the actual game. But technically there's a level above that, which is in the team manager. So when we first start the game, assuming this is like a brand new game, no, it's good questions though, Dusty Ham. There's a step back further that I could dig into. So we have a list of team members, and we first initialize for the very first time. We go through our design data. Right now I'm only loading the first 2 characters because I don't want to load everything. And we say, hey, I'm going to load up all of the information about this character for design data. And I'm going to add a unit, add stats, add a job, add a rank, all this stuff. Add a job is actually not adding a job. It's redundantly dead code, but still needs to be there for reasons. And by default, we say that the first 2 characters we load are definitely not companions. But if the character design data companion ID is not equal to 0, then we add a companion. And adding a companion basically does the exact same thing as adding a hero, but slightly different because we're adding companion data. So this one here, we say, hey, we expect your companion ID to be the design data we should go look up. And we generate that unit, and we say, okay, and also your companion is whoever the creating team member made you. And then, so technically in the back end, we still have the same problem. We don't have groups in the back end. We still have this idea that I was illustrating before, where in the back end, we're still doing the same thing, where we have like a unit, turn off eraser mode. We have a unit, and then we have a companion, and then we link the 2 of them together, and then they both live together in this linked way inside of the team manager. So we're trying to now change it, so instead of doing this for the turn order, we do it with unit groups. So maybe we should also store them as unit groups in the back end as well. That way, when we're passing the information through, we don't have to deconnect these two guys, load them separately, and then try and find each other out in the world. Yeah. So yeah, and then I could just create the units as a group instead of having to create them as a series of individual units and then rebuild the groups later. All right, so let's take a further step to here then. So right now, this is how we do it. And we have a list of team members. No, I'm 100%. Yeah, I'm on board with what you're saying, Dustin Ham. Like, rather than keep all of this stuff in a bad format in the back end and then just try and resolve it when we actually go into combat, we should probably just keep them in a better format in the back end and then just pass that better format through, smack our keyboards as we do it, and pass that better format through to the battle. That way we're not having to... There's some real clunkiness here, and I think we're just trying to resolve that clunkiness. And it has to go from the beginning, from the root of all issues. All right, so... Let's see. This means that we need another new class, I think. Because units and team members are different things. And in the same way, a team member is an object that has a list of all of the options. Why do we use a team member object? Let's question everything. Instead of just referring to them by the unit in the same way that we do for everything else, why do we actually hold a team member list? Do we ever get these things by stats? We do a bunch of stuff with Experience Results Manager to display the experience via stats. And we pass the stats through this way. If this was instead just a unit data, we could still just do get component on that unit and get the stats. So we could follow the same architecture we use everywhere else. I think the only reason we use team member here is just to have kind of more of a root object that actually has everything. Because unit contains design data. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to try and remove team member here too. I think this is me getting lazy and not sticking to my guns on the methodology that we're using, which is get component. So we're going to try just doing a unit group here. And we're going to say that the team manager actually has a unit group for its team members. So every team member is a group of units, which will be helpful for like the status menu, for the equip menu. All of these things will be grouped together as hero and companion. We're really leaning into the entire architecture here that we assume that our game has companions. There are two units. They act as one though. They level up separately. They have different abilities, but they are one character. They are one group for all purposes in our game. And I think that's a perfectly fine thing for me to work under. Okay, so instead of this, let's call this team members just unit groups. And now also we technically should be doing the same naming convention we do everywhere else here, which is M underscore. Stick to my guns, try and be consistent. All right. Now we make a team member. And we make that team member mostly just to add each of these things, but we don't have to. So we make a unit object. We Dusted Ham says, oh, something interesting about Unity's get component that you may or may not be aware of is you can get interfaces. I don't know what that means. Well, I know what that means. It's just, I don't really want to dive into why you would be suggesting that. Okay, so let's do... So in this situation, we generate the companion as part of the for loop to generate the character. So this actually works really well. So we can make a unit group. And then from here, we can do unit group initialize with the first unit, like so. And then we can do unit group should return, this returns a team member. We can make this instead return a unit. We can do unit group dot add unit. Yeah, this is way cleaner. I think I'm going to need to change the way that I handle loading a little bit, but I think this should still be fine. We need to add this function, which is probably just going to be a pass-through. Really, we don't need an init. Really, this is just an add unit. They should just do the same logic. It's identical, just different naming. Where'd my team stuff go? Here. So add a unit, and then here, instead of returning a team member, we want to just return the unit object that represents this companion. Here. Like that. It doesn't like that I have unit twice, because unit is also the name of the game object. Alright, so then let's do a... This might cause some problems, but object... And then return that unit object. Okay. You still return a team member, but it should now be a unit you return. Okay. Okay. So we now have a unit group, and we can add that unit group at the very end. Like so. Nope, not like that. Like that. Okay. So now instead of a list of team members, we can have a list of unit groups. If it has a companion, it makes that companion and adds it to its group. Okay. Now, team members. We call here through get team members. So instead, let's make a new function. Again, I'm going to replace all this after. Maybe I should be replacing inline now so I don't have to run through this code twice. Unit group. Unit group. Okay, now these are all the spots where we use it. Experience manager is one thing. We even already have stuff that's like a unit pair for like some of the naming and stuff. This just makes a lot of sense to do. Okay, so where does this make sense to start modifying? So there's several spots where we get the team members. But now we want to return a unit group instead. Debating whether or not we actually want to refactor all of this all at once or piece by piece. That's still the question. Because it's going to complain about every little step that we take. Okay, let's just start here. Let's start at the beginning. So this is really the root of the problem. So the reason we went all the way back there was for this moment, which is that when we go into the character loading manager, which is in charge of taking the team data and then generating combat variants of that team, this is where that logic happens. So we have the get team members, which now instead is getting a list of unit groups. And then we initialize the character model with some team member data, which now instead of being team member data, is actually going to be a list of units. So for every group, we want to go through that group and we want to initialize it. Why do we do this twice? Take a step back and actually read the code before we make too many changes. We have team members for initializing the models. We're also initializing the models here. Index, index. Oh, I see. We initialize the characters and then we initialize the companions of those characters. So technically, this logic can be combined now that we're doing it as a group. We don't need this second call. Okay. Okay. I see. So this second function isn't going to be here anymore. We're going to remove that with this new system. So we're going to get a group, then we're going to loop through each of the groups. Unit groups. We're going to loop through the unit groups. And then for each of the units, we are going to load it. We're going to do the index incrementing only after that. Because this index is basically used to decide which spawn location to use. So we want to spawn all similar units at the same location, and then we offset them by 0.5 positive or negative based off whether they're front or back in the row. So we want them all to be in the same spawn location. And then we're going to pass in the unit here. This needs to be a get the units. Which I can make public, or I can make this private, I think. Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea to just do it this way. This will get a list of units. Get units. Which will just return this list. Cool, cool. And then here we're going to just call through that list. Now instead of taking in team data, this is going to take in a unit. We are going to set a unit for the character data. And now here for the character data, when we create a unit, we're going to pass in an existing unit as the thing I want to copy. And then anywhere where it has a problem, we're going to do a get component now, stats. Or whatever the whatever the corresponding piece should be. Throat's getting dry. I'm dying. I'm not. It's okay. All right. So, this should be get rank. Then data.current row position. So this is the one variable that I think actually kind of made sense to have, but I think we can still get that. So we can do data.row and then current row position. We'll just need to make sure we actually set the units to have the right row positions inside of the actual team manager. So here, when we generate the rows, oh, they don't have rows. I think they should. I think they should have rows in the back here. Instead of just doing current position equals front, I think this should actually be we should be adding a row to the unit. Yes. And then we also, so these two variables we'll have to find different ways of handling throughout. Okay, so for now we're going to assume, as we continue with the unit factory stuff, that we will add a row to the back ends, because in the main menu you might want to be able to switch who starts in the front. So you might want to say, hey, for me, I want to have it so that my companion always starts in the front, because I think that's cool. I want him to take damage, and I want him to be the one who goes first, or something. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some mathematical reason, like the speed of the turn order is determined by whoever is in front or something. Okay, so let's do this, and then here. So we would add companion by data.companion. So this was saying whoever my companion was, assign it here. Again, in the same way, I think that we could just add the companion class here to say who my companion is. So for here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do get component, and we're going to assume that the back-end version of the unit that we're cloning or making a copy of for combat also has a companion component attached to it. And then from here, we can just get my companion and set it this way. It doesn't like that because it expects it to be a team member. But now it's a unit. Does that break anything by making it a companion? No, because design data is still on this. Okay, so that still works fine. That's okay. Still functioning.
The world we inhabit is
no, stop. Silly Twitch. Tricks are for kids. Okay. I opened an ad. I went to click on Twitch and it was like, do you want to listen to this? And I was like, no, go away. All right. Now we really have a dying voice. All right. So we created the unit now by passing in the unit instead of the team member. So this is no longer a problem. Now, if is companion determines whether or not we add it to the turn order. The problem we now run into is how do we hook the two systems up? So now we've made it so that in the back end, the team manager holds a unit pair, or sorry, a unit group. And that unit group gets passed on down, and then we use that unit group to generate the units. But because of the separation of data where we actually have to go from initializing with a unit to the point where we put them into the list on the other side, we now have a disconnect. So we run back into the same spot we were at before, where we need to build the unit group. Can we do something before this though? So when we initialize these units, could we be passing in the unit group instead into the model loader? I don't think so. I think I still want to build them this way. The model loader does hold data for me though, in between the onload. So we could pass in this in a different way. So when we initialize our units, instead of adding the unit group here, we could do that one step above. Where'd my one step above go? Here. So when we're looping through, we want to make a new unit group. And we want to add that unit group to the combat manager. And then we want to pass that unit group in to the initialization unit group. We want to save that unit group in this class. And we want to, after we finish doing all of this, simply add our unit to it. And that should all just work. Okay, feeling all right about that. So then this creates a unit. It returns currently a game object, but it doesn't have to. It could instead return the unit, because this create is only used in one spot, and currently the return value isn't even set to anything. We just let it go to waste. So we can instead return a unit, and then we can add that unit to the unit group, like so. Okay. So now we initialize a new unit group when we loop through all of our unit groups, and we add that new unit group to the units for unit group. And we pass that reference into our model creator, eventually getting passed in here. We will need to keep all of this logic the same for creating monsters as well. So we're going to have to do that too. But let's take one more step back. We're not going to need this for each anymore, I don't think, because we will be loading the companions and the units together. So we can get rid of that. Now we load the monsters. When we load the monsters, we load them as design data. We initialize them with that design data. We create the unit here. And by the same token, I think we just need to return this instead. And we just need to follow the same concept here. When we set the unit group, we need to also set one for monsters. So when we create a monster initialization, we need to pass in a unit group here as well. And then we need to set it. And then we need to add that unit that we create as a monster here. And then the last piece of the puzzle is when we do this initialization here, we need to do the same group creation. We need to create a unit group at the beginning. There isn't a loop here for monsters. Right now, monsters are only ever one, but we could very easily add monster groups if we wanted to. And that would be right after the index. Okay, and then we pass this unit group into here. And we should have a list of populated unit groups for turn order inside of our character manager at the start of battle now. Which means we can start removing this guy and replacing all of its instances with unit group for turn order. Holy massive refactor Batman. All right. Okay, there's other problems though. There are other problems. Let's take a quick save and take a look at the error list, because I imagine there's a couple. Primarily, it doesn't like the fact that this is returning a list of units, groups, instead of team members. Which is funny that it only shows it in a few spots. Oh, it's just because it doesn't have all those types of files open, so it doesn't show me all the errors. So anywhere here, we're going to have the same problem. Welcome back, Dustinham. I guess I'll quickly go back before we move on, let's take a quick review here. So what we did was we made it so that inside of the character loading, which is inside of some magic place. God, so many files. Okay, so when we create a monster, we'll go back this way. This happens in model loader. Model loader gets initialized from character loading manager. Let's pin that too. More pins. Oh, popcorn dusted ham. Oh man, I had popcorn last night. It was good. I like popcorn. So what we do is when we go through the backend manager, get team members, which is really now get unit groups. We loop through those unit groups. We generate a new unit group at the beginning of each of these 4 loops. We then go through all of the units inside of our unit groups. We then initialize the character model with the unit and that unit group we just made. And then when we're done, we add that unit group to unit groups for turn order, which honestly we could do up here. Because really, at this point, what we're doing is we're passing this reference through. This reference then gets saved inside of the model loader class so that we can have access to it on load. So when we go to the onload function, we now add the unit that we create from the unit factory to that unit group. So ideally, if the references all make sense, this value here should be the same as this value here, which gets added. And all the companions, you could have multiple different group units in each group, but for us, we're assuming there's always a pair right now. So the hero and the companion will get loaded here. They'll both get added to the same unit group, and then their unit group will get added to the turn order. So I think that should function now. We're getting a group of units, we're creating that group of units under this pairing, and then we're adding that pairing to this manager. So we've consolidated our system so that things are linked in hard sets. Now to clean up the mess that we've left in our wake. Okay, there's a number of things we need to do. Let's write them down so that I don't lose track of them. We need to, because that when we're now passing in the unit instead of a team member, we're basically refactoring the idea of a team member out. The current position value, we assume that there's a row component on the backend version of the unit. So we need to add a companion component to backend units. Same thing with the, oh, sorry, this is for the row. So we need to add a row component to the backend manager units. And then for isCompanion, we now don't use that value, but we still need to add a companion component to the backend units. So now there's a couple extra components the backend version of the units need in order for us to generate the cloned versions for combat. We also need to do a cleanup pass on get team members, which is used throughout some of the UI in the front end. This now needs to account for them being unit groups, not team members anymore. And then last, certainly not least, we need to go into Combat Manager and we need to use the unit groups for turn order instead of units for turn order. That is what we need to do in order to finish this refactor. A couple different avenues. Let's start with the back end, I think. Let's work our way. Let's, instead of here, add a new components. Let's see, add rank. Here we go. Let's copy this one. So add rank, let's add row. In fact, we might be able to take an add row function directly from here, which is kind of an indication that potentially Team Manager and Unit Factory maybe should share more functionality than they actually do at this point. That looks right. So then let's add row and then pass in the unit, and we have to give it a front or back. We'll say for now that by default the hero is in front. And then we need to do the same thing for the companion. So the companion is going to need to call that same function. but assume that he's in the back. Okay. And then we're going to need the same thing with add companion, I believe, because inside of Unit Factory, we made the assumption that the unit has a companion which has his companion linked to it. So, we're going to change this slightly. There we go, fix my brackets. Let's have this actually store in a temporary companion object, or unit companion variable. Unit variable named companion. Let's do that. And then we're also going to need to do an add of a companion component, which is something like this. Not great. All right, so this is the add component variant. This assumes some nonsense, actually. Let's not use a copy of that other companion one. Let's instead... We pass in here, right? We pass in the creating team member. Instead of saying the creating team member, let's pass in the unit. What do we actually do with this thing? Yeah, we just set this as a companion team member. Yeah, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that anymore. We're getting rid of team member. We're removing it. We're losing it. Let's instead pass in the unit, which is really what we care about. And we will say it's the creating unit instead. And then here, we're going to do a... add component. Oh, sorry, add companion. And the companion will equal creating unit. And then for creating unit, add components. We will add the companion. Okay. I don't like the way this is written in terms of variables, but this should work. Okay, so now when we add a companion, we make sure to pair them up and give them the game objects. And by doing that, now when we get to the unit factory, when we add a companion, we just get the companion object, the companion component, and find what that was set to. Okay, cool. So now the back end should be better. Let's continue the fun of ripping things up. So we don't need any of this anymore, or at least we shouldn't. This, I'm not sure what this is. This is a value we store temporarily for reasons. Okay, that's fine. I'll figure out how to make that not garbage at a later point. Okay. Killing team member. Team member's dead. We're killing this. We're killing this one. We're killing all of this. This can all go now. We don't need you. We've refactored you out. You're an excess class that just complicates the system when really we just need to have more simplicity so it's easier to understand. I do still wonder about whether or not we should be duplicating all of these pieces because yeah, I don't need that. Let's rename this to unit object. And then let's actually make a unit and then pass that in there. I see what the problem is. Cool. No longer have team members. We no longer have team members. Which means we remove all of this. This is like the most cathartic part of coding, is just when you go, you know what? This, all dead. Remove it. Nope, don't need it. Goodbye. It was fun while we lasted, but nope. Gotta make it better. Such a nice feeling. Okay, now here, update team after battle. This is where we do the transfer. This is where we copy the data back. So once we've created units for combat, when those combat units are done, we need to update the HP and MP back to these guys. So can we do this in a more generic way? Well, we pass back a list of battle units. Where does this list of battle units come from? This just comes from the list of units. Well, I mean, there's a kind of semi-easy way to do this, which is hello, Grand Dolphins. Welcome to the stream. We are currently massively refactoring the code of the JRPG, i.e. ripping stuff up and replacing it so it works exactly the same way that it did before. But better? Question mark? Grand Dolphin says, I used to watch you back when I was like 9 or 10. Yeah, fairly common. I fell off for many, many years, but I do find that you are not alone in people who stop by to say hello. I appreciate it every time. The channel has kind of dwindled down to like a core set on Discord, and honestly, I still only stream every couple months, and most of it's been coding and game development. So not the most interesting for everyone, but yeah. That's kind of the update, I suppose. Get component health. Which now I can just do .hp, I think. Yeah. So basically we're replacing these M mana with the components. I personally, coding has been a fantastic use for me. Like like Dustin Ham, programming is fun. Programming is where it's at. For me personally, I can't imagine having done anything else. Let's do companion. If companion does not equal null, and I think in this situation, if I have a companion, let's be extra safe. Let's also make sure that if companion is not equal null and the companion object inside of the companion component does not equal null, then we move on. Okay, and then we want to do this exact same logic here. Except again, we want to get the components for HP and mana. So we want to get the companion's HP and mana. Actually, I don't think we need to do this. Yeah, because we're already looping through the unit group and the units. The reason we were doing this before was because we assumed that there was just one object, and this was the kind of dangling effect where we tied companion to unit, so we had to do everything twice. But now I think this should just work. We shouldn't need any of that logic. We just, if the battle unit... Oh, no, not quite. Not quite. Oh, because this battle units isn't a group being passed back. This is just the heroes, which probably means that we need to we actually do need to go through the units companion. I don't like it. I don't like it. It probably means that what we need to do is actually pass back a unit group instead. This is getting into some nth level complexity of looping though, which I'm not super feeling. Also, Grand Dolphin says, I did some programming before, but motivating yourself to learn something was hard, and now I think I can do it. It's more of general motivation. I have more general motivation. I think generally that's the hardest part, is getting into coding. Like when I started with like, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what resources to use. This was back in like 2006. So like the internet was a fine thing, but it's not quite as good as teaching you as it is now. And so I ended up finding like coding, you use Turbo C, and it was like something from the 80s, and it just wasn't what I should have been using. But I still learned to make little text adventures, and it was the coolest thing, you know, showing it to people how like, look, if I hit 1, it shows this text, and if I hit 2, it shows this text. So simple. Nowadays, there's so many tutorials on Unity. Don't watch this for learning, though. This is not for learning. This is... I don't know what this is for. This is for me more than it is for anyone else. But I'm going into some fairly deep concepts most of the time, without really explaining what I'm doing exactly, but more just kind of showing the workflow. Talking it through, but not going into every detail of what each of these things I'm doing is. Just more broad scope concepts. Okay, so we kind of have to do this because this doesn't have a list of the companions in it. It has the list of companions inside of itself. So maybe we crack this out then. Can we do it this way? Where we do the battle unit, get component, companion, get companion, companion does not equal null. And then check to see if battle unit companion design data ID equals the unit's design data ID? Oh god. This'll work, but it's not great. Let's move these all down a line so it's a little easier for me to read. So if the battle unit had a companion, and that companion's value was not null, which I don't know how you could have this be a true, but let's leave it because it's safer. Then this is equal to, and if this unit that we're currently looping through's design data equals the companion's design data, then set the current unit's health and MP equal to the companion's health. I don't like it, but I'm probably going to leave it. I can see people talking in chat. They're probably complaining. Can I make a suggestion that might make reading a bit simpler? I guess, Dusted Ham, go for it. But I reserve the right to ignore it. Alright, so this does loop through all the unit groups, loop through all the units in the unit groups, loop through the battle units, check to see if the battle unit's design data equals the unit's design data, or check to see if the battle unit had a companion and if its companion's design data ID equals the unit's design ID. If so, copy the unit's health and HP to equal either the battle unit's health and HP or the battle unit's companion's health and HP. Okay, that's a fair response. Battle unit, try get component, something I rarely use, which passes in an out for companion. Which in this situation I'll have to make one. I wonder if this works. So in this situation, can I do try get out the companion, then check to see if the companion does not equal null? And then companion. Why isn't it like this? Oh, because I don't need this anymore. I see. I don't love the fact that this thing is called companion on the inside. Can I do a rename here and just call this thing like companion unit? This should also be M underscore because that's the naming convention and I lose it sometimes, but that's what I want to go with. I like it. All right. I lost my spot. Team manager, I think, is where we were. Okay. So we have a companion class that we set to null, and then we try get companion, which I guess we don't need this anymore, it looks like. It's grayed out, which means it's redundant because it can figure out what type of component we're trying to get based off of the object we're passing in as the out for parameter. So it's going to try and get this. If it fails, it'll just return false. If it does get it, we'll check to see if the companion unit was set to something, which there's no case in which this shouldn't be set to something if it had a companion component attached to it, but you never know. And then we will check to see if the design data matches, but again here we can replace this with the simplified version. There we go. All right, yeah, that's a bit cleaner, Dusted Ham. I accept it. I accept it. We'll leave it. All right, so that's cleaned. So now we've removed team member. From here, but there's still a lot of problems. There's still a lot of problems. Why? This is all to do with battle results. So this all boils down to the fact that get team members has been fundamentally changed. So instead of getting back a list of team members, this now returns a unit group. And that unit group now requires us to actually go through... Requires us to go through things. Alright, so... Can't do just that. This is a bad naming job. I was like so confused on why this said on zone button complete. That's because I copy and pasted that from somewhere else. On complete, what do we do with this thing? Why do we need the team member? Because we initialize some sort of animation. Why do we need the team member inside the animation? Because we want the stats to fill the XP bars and the level. So this needs to take a unit. Let's start here. This needs to take a unit object. And instead of holding a list, a team member, it needs to hold a unit. And then where we do stats, we need to do get component stats. And then we should be able to remove this old code and replace it with this new code. This is a problem we'll have to figure out how to solve. This variable needs to be stored somewhere else. For the time being, I don't have a great solution for this. There's so much that needs to be rewritten. Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. We are now at... What has it been? Hour and a half. So it's been 3.5 hours of streaming. I think we're on a good path forward for refactoring a lot of this stuff. We're basically just going through and doing the menial labor at this point, which is going through and replacing everywhere where it says team manager, where it was doing a list of team members, to now use units. And instead of using unit or dot stats or whatever it was doing before, we now need to go through and change it to use dot get component stats, because it's the structure that we want to try and go with, and we wrote some bad code and we're trying to get rid of it. And then once we're finished doing that, then we need to figure out how we're going to handle this last experience earned, which was a variable that was stored in team member and never anywhere else. So maybe I need to add this to one of the existing components, because this was currently used. It's not going to show me, but if I do a find in the entire solution, I should be able to see the references for it. So it was currently being set here. And so we would just need to do the same thing like inside of rank potentially. What if we just did that? Well, rank doesn't exist because team member doesn't exist. Where does a word come from? This comes from get team members, which is Series of unit groups. Oh my goodness. Okay. I think, though, I can add to the rank class this value, which I can just store temporarily here. Which is not ideal, but it just needs to live somewhere until I find a better spot so that I can finish the refactor and have it actually build. So now here, this will be unit.getComponent, and then we want to get the rank in order to get this value. Okay. Okay, cool. So now, is this class done complaining? Yes. Yes, it is. So now we need to move on to the next complainer, which is probably this guy. So this thing here, it does some weird stuff. I'm going to get rid of this, like, using party thing, because I'm not a huge fan of that. And I think it could just be a unit group. Okay. Let's see. So one thing I'm realizing is I never actually converted this end screen to use multiple characters. Currently it only shows the heroes. I only got the combat to actually show multiple components and multiple stats. But I don't know what the reward screen looks like now that we have heroes and companions, and this is forcing me to have to think about that. And I don't want to. Is the long and short of it. Is this right? No, this returns a list of unit groups. Okay, so I think what we're going to do for now is we're going to take in this list of unit groups. We are going to loop through that list of unit groups, and we are going to assume that that unit group get units. Sorry, other side, get units, and then we're going to just get unit 0. And then we will get component rank. And then I pass this in like here. Now party members is a list of units, and then we just need to replace get component. So this isn't, I'm going to have to refactor this part separately. In fact, I'm going to write that down over here in a second. But like, this is kind of, this isn't part of the, I'm trying to just refactor the system. Just make the code work the way that it used to. But the problem with this is that we never actually refactored the results screen to handle 2 sets of units. So we're just going to make it work with one. This now assumes this. I think this is just this now, because this is the weighting. I think I'll have to review all this stuff later, but let's just get it to compile. What are you complaining about now? Battle Results Manager. This is still to do with all the results screen stuff. Can I do the same thing here? Where this just does... get component... Thank you, whoever that was, for the follow. Get components... Unit group, get components... Get units. And then I think we're going to do the same bad thing here where we're just going to assume the first unit is what we want to grab. And then instead of a team member, this is just expecting a unit now. Which then initiates the animation system, which is now expecting a unit. Okay. So this needs a refactor, but this is kind of, it's not... we need to redesign experience screen for companions. All right, now what's the problem? Okay. I think this needs to be get units. Gross, 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 gross. It just keeps getting worse. Okay, so then this is going to be a unit. Then all of this has to be get component stats. All right, here we go. We're in a groove, though. I know how I want to fix it for the time being. Some of this stuff is absolutely awful. Can I do a find replace? Find replace this with anywhere we have stats, and then do it within selection. Okay, that seemed to work. And then we just want to do .get unit 0 on whatever we're doing here, here, or here, and then replace this with the type of unit. And then let's add a to do redesign for companions. All right, and then continuing down the error list, one by one, fixing each problem. What's this? Experience results. Same thing. Okay. Find replace. Current selection. Replace. Dot. Get units. 0. Type unit. To do redesign for companions. Because basically what we're doing is we're making it so only the heroes gain experience and the companions never will. This needs to get this value from get component rank, because that's where we decided to store it for the time being. All right. Same thing here. We're just going to assume that we're just going to get only the heroes, nothing for the companions. This also makes the pretty hefty assumption that the hero is always the first index, which I think is true, but not a great assumption. Same thing here. Selection, replace. Get units. Again, we're assuming 0. Unit. This is a unit. This is a unit. This should be get component companion. Which implies to me, yeah, we're now in a different section of the code. What the heck is the variable called? Companion unit. There we go. To do make not bad. All right. Let's see. Are we close? I still think there's more errors and more problems, but hopefully we've resolved the mass majority of them. The vast majority? The mass majority? The vast majority of them. Well, it's not broken. It's saying there's no errors. So that's something. So I think we've refactored everything. This is the worst one. We refactored everything so that now wherever we're doing get team members, it now expects a unit group instead of a team member. We've replaced team member with a unit group. That's just a concept now. And we have it so that when we go into the character loading system, we actually will load up the units into unit groups for turn order instead of into the turn order stuff. So now the next thing is a bunch more replacements, although this one doesn't look as bad, where we need to, instead of using units for turn order, we should be using unit group. So anywhere we see this value, it should now be this value. And let's just quickly do that. Seems reasonable. And now instead of taking a list of units, this should take a list of unit groups. It should store a list of unit groups. Should loop through a list of unit groups. I'm not sure why I decided to put this at the bottom of the class. It's gross. All right. So everywhere that this class uses unit, it should be using unit group. And then all the red should go away. Cool. This is spots where we were generating it, so that's definitely safe to just remove because now we are actually adding it to the unit group. So we can just remove all the spots where that was happening. We still need normal units. Okay, and now let's do another find all references. We've limited it a little bit more. Get random target. Why was this using get units for turn order? Oh, I see. We had to use units for turn order and get to random targets because we wanted to make sure that we were always targeting them as a unit. Okay, yeah. Okay, all right. So this now needs to be unit groups. This definitely wants to be that. This implies that a group of units should have an alliance, not the individual unit. Don't know how I feel about that. think the correct answer here is to have a unit which we find as the target or front unit is probably the better way to think about this. And this will be null. And then we are going to, for each unit, in our unit groups, we are going to loop through all of them, and we are going to check if unit dot get component row, what's the variable, current row position equals rows dot front. Then front unit is equal to this unit. And then we are going to use that front unit's alliance. This is going to cause issues eventually, I think. And we're going to add targets. And then we don't need to do the front check because we're already doing that above. Dot get units. Okay, we're going to loop through all the units in our unit groups. Of those units, we're going to find the one that is in the front row. We are going to set that to be the front unit, and then we are going to check the front unit's alliance to see if he is a valid target, and if he is, we will add him to the target list. And then I'm going to add a design to do here, which is to do design question. Can one be confused but not the other? Can a companion be confused and the hero isn't? In which case, what does that look like? It's a weird question with our dual companion system, which I had not thought about. It's an interesting conundrum. Alright, what are we doing here? We're getting units for turn order, checking the alliance type. Again, this seems to imply that we use turn order as a definition of whether or not a pairing is of a specific group. Now, why do we do this? This is because we add heroes and enemies. I see, and we represent the heroes and enemies as a pair of groups. Uh-huh. Slightly weird, but alright. So this is how our UI gets initialized. So now, instead of looping through units for turn order, we should be looping through unit groups for turn order. And then we can make the pretty bold statement that get units. The first unit represents the alliance for right now. And I'm going to add another to-do. This is a stream full of to-dos where I have to think about should alliance be on the unit pair? I.e., can things be confused as a pairing? And how do we interact with that? But for the sake of getting through this stream, I'm going to just do this, which is a pretty awful thing. What did I do wrong? Oh, I see. I didn't copy the other piece. Dum, 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 dum. Okay. What else? What else is currently using this absolutely awful class? Ooh, we're down to just a couple. One of them is this one that we were just on. I missed this down below. Yeah, so this still assumes that when we create the pieces, we create it as the component pairs. So I do want to change that at some point. Now this is code that I think we can remove because we're writing better code. So here, instead of doing any of this nonsense on death, we shouldn't have to remove the units from turn order per se. We still might need to do something, but I don't know if it's this exactly. Because the unit should be in charge, the unit pair should now be in charge of handling this. Okay. So on death, the unit pair should handle whether or not things get modified. Yeah. So this requires deeper thought to do. How does a unit pair handle both units dying? Because we don't need to worry about one dying. We only have to worry about both dying. Okay, so now if we go all the way back to the very beginning and we look at units for turn order, it's no longer being used anywhere. Instead, we are using unit groups for turn order. I'm also not 100% sure that I love some of the situations this is being used in. Like maybe the problem with this being implied that it should have alliance isn't to do with it being the unit group that's the problem, but like the unit group shouldn't be used for initializing the UI potentially. I don't know. There's something weird about this that I want to think on further before making any decisions on. I do like the way this is panning out. It's feeling better. There's just some spots where it's like, well, I'm making it work, but I'm making it work by working the exact same way it used to. And I need to think about how I want to change this to work with this new grouping. Because this thing generates a pair and then initializes the hero and the companion. But if it generates a pair, maybe instead of assuming that there's a hero and a companion, it should just loop through all the units in the group and add each of those to this unit object. And each of these you can have as many unit statuses as you want. I think for our game we'll only ever have 2, but this should probably just be a loop through the groupings. Like we should probably be storing the groupings, not the first unit. Yeah, I want to think on it some more though. I think that's the answer, but I'm moving a little bit apace because I need to end this stream soon, I think. And I just want to get everything into a wrapped up state before I call it. Okay, so what's left? I think the last big problem we're going to run into is the turn order. The turn order now stores and returns units, pairs, instead of individual units. So this current active unit, which is kind of the crux of our entire system, isn't going to be holding a current active unit. It's going to be holding a current unit group. Current active, actually I'm going to do that rename. This is now a current active unit group. Okay. Now, everywhere that was being used, it assumes that there is just one unit. And like, there's even this concept of the current unit inside of the UI state. But I think realistically, we actually want to change this to also be the current unit group. Which means this is a current unit group. Okay. It's just going to ripple. There's going to be so many errors with this. So like a current unit group doesn't have a list of IDs. This is actually where we're getting into the actual crux of the code. Like the last hour has mostly just been me refactoring and renaming, and maybe the last hour and a half has been just been refactoring and renaming so that we could use unit group. But this is where we're actually getting to the point where we could really make some effective changes. The whole reason we're doing all of this is mostly for this exact function right here, which is that when I do ability IDs, it was based off of the units, and the way that these ability IDs would get generated, the way that these ability IDs would get generated would be that there would actually be a list of them that was added from init, and then when companions would get generated, they would also add their list of IDs to this list. The whole thing we're trying to do is to remove this concept. Instead, each unit should just have its own list of IDs. So this whole add companion abilities shouldn't really be a thing. And so because of that, we now need to get the list of abilities that we show for the UI state by writing some sort of function that actually gets the list. So this unit group should have some sort of public list of... What is a unit ID? It's ability infos. So unit group should have a list of ability infos. Get abilities. And this should have like a results parameter. And then we should loop through all of our units in M units, and we should basically, where did I just see that code? If it doesn't have the knocked out status effect on it in some spot, then we should do a add unit dot ability IDs to the result and then return the result. I think I need to do an add range. Yeah, there we go. And so now here we do get abilities. And this is what an hour and a half of code refactoring has been for. Is so now instead of having to like hard code the ability IDs, we can now just do this. I think the main problem with this is this looks pretty clunky to me, simply because we have to do the get multiple times. So we just want to store this, I think. Yeah, there's a reason why we're doing this, and it's a little weird. But there's valid reasons. So we do about get this, slap that here, remove this, add abilities here, and then we just do that. Okay. Cool. Ability button pressed. Interesting. Current unit has problems. We do actually need the current unit to be the current unit. But in other spots, we need the current unit to be the current unit group. So we need both. That's neat. Did that backwards. I want to add the word group to this one. Okay. And then I want to have the current unit group here. Okay, and then here I want to use current unit group for this section. Here we assume that the first unit is always the monster, because monsters don't have multiple units. We'll probably want to add some AI logic to that at some point if we do have multiples. Okay. Okay, cool. We still have many conflicts. Like the views are now getting groups. Which we can do the same, get units. Oh, I forgot the brackets. Okay, so in the last few spots here, this is probably how this is going to turn, is we're likely just going to get units and then just grab the first one. And I think what we might want to do is replace this with a function, which is like get primary unit or something, or get leading unit, some sort of like way of grabbing a specific one, rather than just doing the first index. But this was never the primary. Ooh. I have problems here. I actually want this to be a unit group. And I want to store the unit group for the round icon. And then when I want to get the unit group. And then for the sake of, oh man, because if I don't rename some of this stuff now, I'm never going to do it. Okay. Oh man, you know, I know I've been looking at code for too long because unit group is starting to like look fuzzy to my brain. Maybe what I want to do is I want to, like, it doesn't look like the word unit anymore. It's starting to become like a non-word. Okay. Just going into full find replace mode. Okay. Nope, that's not what I meant to hit. How do you like me now, Unity? There's no way this runs. Not successfully the first time anyways. It's not having a companion attached to it. Which I think makes sense in some situations. Some of our characters don't have companions. That's a fine bug. I have no issue with that one. That was a pretty clear oversight on my part. Okay, okay. Let's see. So, if this does work, problem areas. We still need to refactor the system because in a lot of spots where we use unit group, we're still just getting units and getting the first unit in order to make it just function. So it's still failing, but at least it loaded everything. That's pretty amazing. It's a lot farther than I thought I was going to get. Null versus... Ah. Again, this is one of those spots where this needs to actually be... I was getting sloppy near the end here because I was moving too fast. This needs to actually be the first unit to get the alliance. This really does bring up a good question, though, as I often directly reference the current unit to check whether or not he has a specific alliance. But in these situations, really, we're now checking the current unit group alliance because we treat them as one entity. So if we'll have to figure out how we're going to handle confusion in this game, or if we even have confusion. Because if we have the hero confused but the companion not confused, what does that do? Does it remove them from the unit group? And now, what if they're both confused? Like, what does that look like? So there's a number of spots where the code compiles where we are getting component. Where it actually needs to be something slightly different. It's actually not as broken as I thought it would be. I think we hacked it together to get it to run. But if I can get this to run, I'm going to call it a stream, I think. And I think in a, like, probably off camera, I'll look at refactoring everything else. Holy smokes, was this a video about how tedious changing code can be, though? Same problem here. This needs to actually be getting the first unit to get its selector. Anywhere else where we're having this problem? Same thing here. Same thing here. Yeah, so these are all, again, examples of where the code needs to be different. This can't function this way. It fundamentally has to do something else. Yeah, this is bad. A lot of this is still really bad. But I think I can do a search for get units, you know, bracket 0 bracket, square bracket 0 square bracket, and I should find all the spots where the code was incompatible, essentially, where we made it compatible, but where it was incompatible with unit groups. And I'm going to have to think about how do we handle each of those situations in which it used to be a clear, this is the unit, this is what we do. But now it's not quite that. It's more, more something else. All right. So then, it didn't break. Did it? Did I run it again? I got distracted. Thank you for the follow, person. I didn't see it. I couldn't get the window open. Okay, so then, okay, yeah, we still have an error. Unit, get component, front. Really? That's the first error I've seen that actually looks kind of weird to me. Because this is looping through all the units, trying to find the front unit. Null reference object not set to an instance of an object. Huh. Okay, well. Okay then. Okay. I'm going to have to debug it. I was hoping everything would just run without me having to do anything except change small issues that I could see with my eyes. Of course it's not that easy. All right. Yeah, but the heart and soul of this is that there are spots where we used to do a single unit, where now we're using a group, and I need to figure out if, like, we do just want to check the single unit, or, like, for alliance, is there just a group alliance that we determine? Do we have, like, a get function that gets the alliances of both units, and if it's the same, then we move on? I am seeing the command menu showing up. That means that it got all the abilities from this character correctly. It's just a problem with the... couple of weird states, like this one. Before we used to be, I think the way we've changed this now is that there will always be a companion. I'm not sure why that this used to work and now it fails, but we've obviously changed something. I assume that we're now adding a companion component to the hero that doesn't have a companion. And that's causing fundamental issues? Interesting. Also interesting is that we're getting different errors each time we hit play. Oh. Maybe not. Okay. So. Oh, come on. So close. Okay, so the error we are getting now is just to do with the enemies. When the enemies try and choose a random target, it breaks. And it's breaking because when it gets all the units from turn order, some of the units don't have a row. Which, like, what? This guy has a row. This guy has a row. This guy has a row. Even the back companions have rows. Oh, was it that enemies don't have rows and now we check the row? Is that what I've done? Do enemies not have rows? Create monster. Yes, monsters don't have rows. Huh. Alright, well. Actually, I don't need to... This is a bad habit of, like, I'm working in Visual Studio recently, and I want to hit run to test things, but that's not how we test things in Unity. We just make the change, save it, and move back over to Unity. I don't need to attach the debugger. I don't know why I said it that way. We're losing it, people. We're losing it. We're 4 hours into the stream. But I think we're on the verge of a major improvement. It's a pretty holistic change. Like, changing it from there being units to unit groups changes the fundamental architecture of how all of our units are stored in the back end, how the battle is run, how everything interacts with those units. Like, this is a pretty fundamental through line that we're kind of messing with right now. And again, I think it's fine. It's okay. Not like, it's gonna run, but it's gonna fail. Just gotta fix this enemy attacking, and I think we're good. Because we saw a hero attack without an issue. And then we should have everything in the backbone of the entire system using groups instead of units. For passing it from the front end to the battle to storing it for turn order. All of it. Like, at this point right now I'm defaulting to, like, the first character portrait, which the character portraits are just colored squares right now. I need to, like, chop out their faces and put them in different images to put here. But we could even do a half and half of each portrait because we have both of them now as a unit pair, because each of these are unit pairs. We're just showing the first one. Ooh, this is broken. That's interesting. So we made progress. We got past the enemy attacking, but the turn order stuff broke. As they perform their actions, they're not getting removed from this list. The list isn't updating. Interesting. So we know exactly where that code is because that's what we wrote in the last stream. So that is to do with the round icon and get unit determines whether or not that round icon was found. Turn order contains get unit, and this is really getting the unit group. So we should rename this. Rename get unit group. So this is the unit group that this round icon represents. And checks if it's contained in the turn order, and if it's not contained, we terminate it. That's how the system should work. So the fact that they're not updating implies that they're being found in the turn order even though they're not? Odd. We are setting... the values correctly, right? Yeah, and we're using the first unit for the portrait. But the unit group itself should be being set. Units for if unit equals unit current is found. Huh. So I must have written something wrong, but I'm not seeing what it is. Usually I can cursory glance at stuff and just know what the problem is. But when I can't, we must debug. So specifically, we need a breakpoint at the beginning of this. So when we go to update the view, what's happening? That is the question. People still lurking? Yeah, plenty of lurkers still. Just wondering if maybe my chat's broken, but I don't think it is. I think you guys are just watching as a background feed. Yeah, okay. Dustin Ham's still around. Okay, chat's still working. I just want to double check. There's always that fear if there hasn't been any noise for a while. It's just like, did my chat break? Can I not see that my chat broke? There's no way for anyone to let me know. Okay, so we're doing this the first time. I don't care. I don't care about the first update, really. It's the every update after the first. So I'm going first. I perform an attack. We should be removing one of the enemies from the list at this point. So there should be at least one that needs to get removed. Turn order contains a count of 2. Both counts are null. Okay. Okay. Was not expecting that to be the problem. So where does this come from? How could it be null and have a problem? The current turn order is null. What? Does that even... What? Get first and remove. Okay, well, how does that possibly work? If current is null, how are we getting valid results? So we return null. We have set null as the current active unit. What? How? What? What? No. 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 What? How is anything functioning? If the current turn order is null, nothing should be acting. Nothing should be able to attack. Nothing should be able to do. Nothing should be able to do. There's the statement. Nothing should be able to do. I'm sorry, what? Wait, is null its name? Okay, sure. Why not? What did I do? So it has a valid list of units inside of it. That's not the problem. The problem is that it's... Okay. Sure. Why not? This is a mono behavior. That's a fun bug I've not seen before. What the heck? Does that break everything now that I make it not a mono behavior? Okay, let's just stop. No, stop. Just stop. Stop. And we're good. Okay, cool. So wait. Does it work now? Does it update? No, of course it doesn't. Okay, well... I don't even understand. Let's see if it's null still. At least... I've never seen that. I mean, it makes sense. If everything's null, then it contains null. So it's not going to destroy it because it's found in the list. You were right, Dustin Ham. There is still a warning about trying to call a mono behavior. This doesn't need to be new. This just needs to be here. That's all. You're all wrong. It's all right. Okay. So... Alright. Focus. Wake up. 4 hours is fine. You can just keep going. It's fine. Alright. So what do we got? We got a weird issue, which hopefully may have just been resolved by needing to recompile. Nope. This is a problem. I'm gonna guess this needs to be a serializable class. I mean, it doesn't need to be. I'm being lazy, but it's now no longer being auto-generated because it's a public list. Now, because it's no longer a mono behavior, it actually needs to be serializable in order for it to get generated. So if I just make it serializable, then it'll, yeah, it fixes my problem. destroy it? Yes. Okay. Interesting. Even though the gray isn't working anymore to indicate whose turn or whose attacks are which, the turn swapping still is. So something intrinsically says this ability is tied to this unit, but that code is no longer hooked up correctly for the tinting of these buttons, which isn't a huge deal. Otherwise, that looks like it might be working. Here's the question. What happens when we get to the end screen? Does the whole thing blow up? Does not appear to. Does it transfer the next turn correctly? It does. It's showing indicators correctly. Okay. I mean, that functions. That's working. So, what did we do? We've now changed it, so instead of using units directly as the source of truth on whose turn it is, we're now using a unit group. And that unit group can have a list of units in it. For our game, primarily that will always be a companion and a hero. But it could be any number, so it's a flexible system. And now this unit group is used for determining turn order. So instead of having a list of units for the turn order, we have a list of unit groups. And these unit groups allows us to have multiple units in each slot. And then when you choose an attack, you perform that attack with one of the 2 units in the group. And then the abilities that we display in the main menu is based off of the actual is based off of doing a get abilities, which gives us all the abilities from any unit that is not currently knocked out. We still have to figure out how we're going to handle death. So when both units die, we will need to have something that removes that unit group from the turn order. And when a unit is revived, we'll have to have some sort of on revive notification that if that unit group that unit was in is, I don't know, we'll have to figure something out. Maybe we shouldn't do this based off notifications. Maybe each time we update the turn order before we get the current unit, we check to see if any units in the turn order are dead. And if so, we don't add them. And maybe we don't remove the unit groups from the turn order. We still keep them around, but there can be unit groups that are dead that just don't show up. And as soon as you revive them, they appear back. There's more problems to be solved, as is true in all game development, but I feel like this unit group, instead of it being a list of units, makes a huge difference in terms of the flexibility of our system. So instead of the companion, like the hero dying and then needing to swap the companion to be the new main unit, and then if the hero gets revived, having to swap back, and what happens if the companion dies but all the list of abilities that the companion could do were inserted into the main hero companion? Well, now how do we, it's like, no, there is one unit group. That unit group checks to see what abilities are available. If people are dead, they just don't return their abilities. And then if both units die, then we remove them from the turn order because there's no one available for them to take a turn in that group. And then if one of them revives, then they start getting turns again. Like, it's way cleaner and simpler to think about. And the companion system makes way more sense when you have them under a secondary layer. All right. It has been a grand multi-hour, specifically 4.5-hour stream. We have done much good work. We have fixed the turn order, really concreted a lot of the information in my head about how turn order works, making sure that I really fully understand the system. And like, we've got these indicators now showing whether or not an enemy is going to take an elemental attack. Hopefully these guys will take an elemental attack as soon as we perform it. So this was like the first 2 hours. Well, of course they don't want to show it. So this guy's going to do a basic attack then. I mean, at least it's reverse inverse showing. Come on. Yeah, so now we can see this guy is going to perform a reduction in fire attack. He's going to do some sort of fire eating ability. So that's cool. And now we've got the unit pairing. So now unit logic is, we didn't really change anything. We really just refactored the whole system. And if anything, we broke the color tinting on the buttons. But now we can actually start working towards making the rest of the system and some of the bugs I was having about units dying work better. Because I was getting a lot of issues where when certain characters would die, the whole thing would break because of the way that we had structured the unit pairing companion stuff. But now I think we're in a much better spot. And then we need to go back and take a look at some of the spots I put to-dos in, where now with unit pairs, we're kind of just assuming the first unit is always the one we should care about, and I'd like to tweak that. But overall, good refactor. Good jumping deep into the code again. So, all right. As I said at the beginning of the stream, but I'll repeat here, this is the last stream for my current computer. I shall be going to buy new computer parts and building a new computer soon. Hopefully the next stream, everything will run a bit smoother on the brand new PC. But this PC has lasted 10 years since the beginning of my YouTube channel. This is its last stream, and I wanted to say goodbye to it. Goodbye to my computer. It's been grand. The next time I stream, it shall be a new machine. But it has served me well for many, many years. And I thank you all for joining me for this content of code. Thanks for all the hard work, Toli's computer, says Kazukish. It resonates. All right. As always, I don't know how to end a stream. I continue to ramble. I got nothing else. All right. For now, this is Tolhi signing out. Later, guys.